So it's been a few months now since I've had the new front suspension fitted, and I've been to quite a few places where I've previously been with the old suspension to give it a proper test or to give it a proper comparison. So it's still January, I'm outside in the rain, it's freezing, but I thought I'd update you on what's been going on with the van and the new suspension so that you can see from all the different types of suspensions I've had fitted to this van, which I believe works best for my van and the type of travelling that I do. So here's a shot of the van when I picked it up. No camper conversion inside, it's just the basic panel van. And what we're doing is comparing the placement of the centre of the wheel hub against its height in comparison to the lower sill. Because obviously these are the smaller 15-inch wheels that the van came with, different tyres, that kind of stuff, and obviously there's nothing inside it. So here I've almost finished the build out of my camper van. I've got new wheels and tyres, 16-inch wheels with all-terrain tyres on there, but I was just about to put a suspension upgrade on my van, so I wanted to go around and measure so that I knew if the upgrade had actually worked or not. So I wanted to measure a point from the floor to the lower part of each wing panel, so I knew if the upgrade had actually worked and by how much it had worked for each corner. And this also gave me an opportunity to go around and ensure that I'd built the van correctly in terms of weight distribution, both front and rear and side to side. So that's my original factory bump stop, and bearing in mind this van's only a few years old, you can see how knackered it is. So I'm going to take that off and then swap it for that one. And if we just do a bit comparison, the new one is much longer and it's also a lot stiffer. Right, well, there's a lot of banging and clattering. It's in, but I did have to use the actual jack to spread out the leaf spring a little bit more, which is yeah, extreme. But it's in. And this is how it looks on its wheels. So that rear bump stop upgrade has compressed quite a lot. And again, for comparison, this was the van when I just picked it up without any conversion, showing the leaf spring fairly flat and the original bump stop. Literally within seconds it's on, and all I need to do now is just twist it round to get it onto the top one. To get it onto there, you just stretch it out with both hands, push it into place, and it falls into place. And as you can see, you then just push it around so it sits in the middle of the whole strut. So this first suspension upgrade just consisted of these spring inserts, both for the rear and the front of the van. Right, so this is the driver's side, aka the offside front wheel. It is now 79, thereabouts, maybe 80. Yeah, 80 centimeters. And then we'll move to the driver's side or offside rear. Just line that one up. So that's what it is over the tyre. And then up to the wheel arch is now there. And then the near side, that's that measurement. And then the near side front, that's that measurement. And then there. Definitely a nice little bit of a height increase. Improve the stance of the van. But it wasn't long after that, and it wasn't many miles after that, that I started to notice that the van wasn't behaving the way that it had done originally when I fitted the suspension. And in fact, the front and rear had begun to sag a lot more. So without adding any extra weight, something had gone wrong with the suspension. It was very, very stiff on just normal highways, but you take it off road and go over any bumps, and it would just bounce around like it had no actual give in the suspension. It was just literally bounce as soon as it hit any undulations in the road. It was like porpoising, I guess you'd call it. And off-road, it had also lost its angle of entry and exit, so it started to scrape. So I had to change it. It just wasn't working. So I removed the upgraded bump stop and went back to the standard bump stop, albeit it was a OEM, sort of like a supposedly a slight upgrade to the standard bump stop version. And I also decided to make some other changes too. I put some double rear leaf springs on to give the back somewhat better suspension, and I also changed the rear shocks to upgraded heavy duty shocks as well. So there's now heavy duty full rear suspension on there with some new, albeit sort of like standard factory bump stops on the rear as well. So with this new setup on the back, I've been impressed with the rear suspension. Handles really great in all the bends, on all terrain now. There's no more rattles and sort of bone shaking ride from the rear, and as you can see now, it's got a lot of ground clearance at the rear. So the next stage is to now improve the front suspension. The front suspension is still the standard factory shock absorber and coil, with those coil inserts, so spring assisters if you like, inside. And actually at one stage, because the original ones had collapsed so much, I actually bought 4 more. So I binned the 2 that I previously shown you and bought 2 per side more to try and get in as much suspension lift as I possibly could, just to help out the way that the van was driving. So I've been doing my research over the last few months now to understand what I need to do to get the front suspension as good as the rear suspension. And that means upgrading the coil and the shock absorber to what they would do in a professional campervan build company. So a vehicle that they understand is going to carry a lot of weight all the time. This is the gear they put in those vehicles. So it's a simple case of out with the old, including those silly little spring assisters on top, and in with the new. So this is what the assembled coil and gas strut and everything looks like, with the top mount on there as well. I wish it did go as easily as just out with the old and in with the new. Yeah, you wouldn't believe the complications of trying to remove and fit these front struts in Jakarta, Relay, Boxer, that kind of vehicle as well. One thing I was immediately surprised by was lifting the front suspension actually dropped the rear suspension a little bit, by about 1 centimetre. So the stance is more level on the van now, because the front's raised up a bit. It's actually pushed the back down. It's not just kind of like, you know, an optical illusion that the front's up so the back looks lower. The back actually dropped 1 centimetre just by the front lifting up a bit. So yeah, the van appreciates it. It drives so much better, and I'm very happy with the upgrade. So I think what we need to do now is talk about costs. So how much did the front suspension cost and how much did the rear suspension cost? The springs were £120 for the pair, and the shocks thereabouts were £200 a pair, and the invoice for fitting is £330. So for 650 quid, I've now got really good suspension on the front, which is as equal as the suspension I upgraded myself on the back. So it's got heavy duty suspension on the back, and now the front has got heavy duty campervan suspension, whereby it's meant to carry like a full load weight all around. And the rear suspension costs were £450 for the double leaf springs, £114 for the heavy duty shock absorbers, £50 for the bump stops, and £120 for labour. So that's a grand total of £734 for the rear suspension upgrades. So the grand total for the front and rear suspension is £1,334. £384. So now the van's got the correct suspension for the weight of the vehicle, which is about 2.91 tons. Recently got it weighed. So I've got the correct suspension on the back, which is double leaf spring and heavy duty shocks, and the correct suspension on the front, which ultimately is Campervan suspension. So it's got the full-time weight kind of capability on it. The van drives great. The stance is a bit more flat, so rather than looking like the 18 van where the front was always nosediving, the stance is flat now, almost. The front does just dip a tiny bit, but yeah, so much nicer. And a little bit of extra ground clearance, which ultimately means it's a bit of an extra step to get into the van as well. But yeah, I'm quite happy now that the van's flat, so I'm parked up, and I've got a little spirit level in my van just to see I'm side to side, so I'm sleeping right and all that. And the spirit level right now is telling me I'm almost level, whereas normally it's like saying nose down, it is always be kind of not level. So that should be quite nice as well. I won't have to roll out of bed. I might have to lift myself and get out of bed. So this is what the rear suspension looks like now, after around about a year to 15 months of being on the van. So it's well bed in now, and as you can see from there, the bump stops still don't really touch, so the rear dual leaf spring and shocks are still fully supporting the rear without the bump stops being needed really, and you certainly don't feel the back end bouncing on the bump stops at all. It looks like it's yeah, like I say, like as you can see there, it looks like it's got the clearance it needs at all times. And the front suspension has been fantastic too. If you look down the side of the van, you'll see that it's settled, but I've still got the same ground clearance at the front and rear as I did when it was sort of finished anyway, when the front was finished. So yeah, it's driving absolutely great, and yeah, no worries whatsoever recommending this setup. And for everyone that's asked, why didn't you fit air suspension on the rear? Well, this is one vehicle that I have experience of air suspension on the rear, and the one previous to my campervan also had air suspension on the rear, and it gives a very different type of ride quality than a dual leaf spring with heavy duty shocks. So it isn't something that I personally feel is something that I would like long term. And now the suspension has settled, let's measure the ride height again. So this is the near side rear wheel arch, near side front wheel arch, that's that measurement, the offside front wheel arch measurement, and the offside rear wheel arch measurement. So from the very start, even though the vehicle looks a lot better than it did the first time we put the wheels and tyres on, but yeah, we've actually been quite productive. The rear has risen by 6 centimetres and the front has risen by 3 centimetres. So in conclusion, yes, I'm very happy with this suspension setup. I get a very comfortable ride now. When I'm going round corners fast, it's nice and stiff, feels like it's on rails. But when I'm going over a bumpy road or an undulating road, then I am getting the softer side of the suspension. So it's very, very comfortable to ride on normal roads, motorways, all that kind of thing that you want. Nice, comfortable, reliable suspension. And yeah, if you want to go on the twisty bits around the bends and have a bit of fun, then you'll find that, yeah, it does that too perfectly well. But then crucially for me, when you want to go off-road or like even speed rumps in town centres and things like that, this absorbs the shocks of the road or the speed bumps or the undulations in the road if you're off-road. So much so does it absorb them that sometimes you get a bit carried away and you don't kind of think, oh yeah, I better slow down for this speed bump or on this rough terrain that I'm on. So yeah, it's coping really, really well. I'm very happy with the way that it's set up. And I just thought I'd make this video so that you guys knew where I was at with my suspension, because there have been a few versions of it by now. And yeah, to let you know what I'd used. And given the fact that, I've had a few months now of trial of where I've been and everything else, how has it worked out, and would I recommend it to you guys? So yeah, thanks for watching. If you've got any comments or questions, please ask in the comments section down below. I'll do my very best to answer them. And until the next time, take care. Bye for now.